scene.
How many people exactly did die?
Patty McConnell and Ray Kitchen. There were 2 fatalities, and then the injuries, of course, included Kelly, the 13-year-old son, Patty's son, and then the student, Ari Van Gelden, Vander Velden, and he was injured in the leg. It could have been a lot worse. Had the Oklahoman with the gun not taken care of the bear, it could have gotten considerably worse. There could have been more injuries, maybe even more deaths. I mean, it could have gone on.
Yeah, I just kind of was curious. Was this a small park?
It's pretty big. When you figure the distance alone, down to the first pool, the alpha pool, is a mile of walking down the boardwalk, and then you've got another mile or 2 between the alpha pool and the beta pool. You've got about a 3-mile wilderness area there that's got the 2 hot springs in it, the 2 pools.
Mm-hmm.
So I
would
would
sound
say
like a large area.
It is. It's a large wilderness area, and as I was talking about earlier, quite remote. You know, so distant from a town, a hospital, an airport, very remote.
But you said that there were numerous people that had come to help the one man that died. Was his name, was it Kitchen, Ray Kitchen?
Ray Kitchen, yes.
There were numerous people that came. Did they come out unscathed, or were they mauled too?
No, they came out unscathed. Fortunately, they threw rocks at the bear. They administered first aid to Patty and to Kelly, and fortunately, they were not attacked by the bear, though it was right there. And at one point, it put its claw up there on the boardwalk, reaching for Kelly or Patty, and Frank Ettingham again started kicking at it with his boots, as did Tony Dalk, and drove the bear off. That's at about the same point that Ari Jan Vandervelden showed up, and it ran after him when he slipped and fell. It diverted its attention over to him, and began attacking his leg. So his arrival on the scene and then fleeing the scene sort of pulled the bear away from the group that were there administering first aid and so forth.
It's just unbelievable to think, in this day and age, something like that can happen.
Absolutely. Now, about a year later, those who survived, those involved in the bear attack that fought the bear, received Carnegie Awards. Kelly McConnell received the Carnegie Award, and he received the Star of Honor. And, of course, Ray Kitchen was awarded the Star of Honor as well, posthumously, which his wife collected. And Frank Ettingham, who kicked the bear, and he was there with Lynn Hancock, who wrote one of the best articles about this. You can look it up. It's Google it, and it's also on the website that I built, the group page on Facebook, which is called the Yard Hot Springs Bear Attack. Lynn Hancock wrote the article "Rogue Bear on the Rampage," which appeared in the Canadian edition of Reader's Digest, but for whatever reason didn't appear in the American print edition. But it's available online. You can easily pull it up and read it, and it's the most accurate, most detailed account that I've ever read of this event. But Frank Ettingham died due to his heart condition less than a year later, and so he also received the Star of Honor, a Canadian award, posthumously as well, and Lynn Hancock was there to receive it on his behalf.
The boy that survived, how did that affect him, and what did he end up doing with his life, or do you know?
Yes, I do. First of all, about a year later in 1998, National Geographic took him back to the scene there at Liard Hot Springs, and he narrated an account of what had occurred. And that's also very good. I've seen it a couple times. I have it on video. It may be online, though I have not located it. I did find another video reenactment that was done in 2009 a show called Human Prey Killer Bears, and Kelly appears on that too, briefly interspersed between the reenactment, making comments on what had occurred that day. That's a very graphic and chilling reenactment of those events. And I have it there where anyone who comes to the Liard Hot Springs Bear Attack group there on Facebook can click that and watch it. And it's also available on YouTube. They can also find it. It's called Human Prey Killer Bears, and it's a very graphic reenactment of this tragedy.
Well, I know, to change the subject just a little bit, I remember reading an article in Reader's Digest, and it must have been 40 years ago because I was just a girl when I read it, but I'll never forget it. And it was somewhere, I want to say it was like Yellowstone or one of the parks like that, and there was a grizzly bear attack. And you and I have discussed this before, and I think you even researched a little bit and could not find any evidence, of that attack. And this would have been probably back in the early 70s. And it was just horrendous. People, I believe, that they were camping, and the grizzly bear came upon them, and they were in their sleeping bags. And I remember specifically that the bear somehow drug, I believe it was a man, all the way up into a tree, trying to get him, I guess, as a meal, and drug him all the way up in his sleeping bag into a tree. And that was just a horrendous account.
Every year, almost, there's someone badly killed or injured in this way. So bear attacks they're more rare than being struck by lightning statistically, but they still happen in certain areas, and they still happen, more often than we'd like to think. At least every decade, just like the numbers that we talked about earlier, at least every decade, about 20 people are killed at various locations. So I guess it's something, as long as there's a bear population around, that it's going to happen when humans encounter bears.
Yeah. Yeah, they say it's one of the most dangerous things you can do is walk up on a mama bear with cubs.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of the fatalities that occur, that's exactly what's going on. It's the instinct, the instinctive kicking in on the part of the mother bear to protect her cubs, and so obviously they'll attack with a level of ferocity that's quite frightening in order to protect their cubs. Now, there's another very interesting aspect to this too. When you look at events, sometimes it's interesting to look at events in terms of the deeper philosophical questions that are raised by the bear attack. And that is in terms of how the different people came to be there that day, the particular mix of people that came there. I'm sure you're familiar with the people who didn't go to work at the Twin Towers on 9/11, this type of thing. Thornton Wilder, about a century ago, wrote a book called The Bridge of San Luis Rey. It's been made into a movie about 3 times. Excellent book. I read it several decades ago. And it has to do with how a group of people who arrived at an Incan rope bridge in Peru, which collapsed while they were crossing it, and they all died, of course. And he deals with the different circumstances that brought them to be there at that bridge. These people who didn't even know each other brought them to be there at that bridge that day. And the question of a chaotic universe in which random events occur versus the concept of a deterministic universe in which an ordered destiny or fate is at work is one of the questions that's raised by these type of things. Viewed from the perspective of a random chance universe, what are the odds that a young woman who left Paris, Texas to move to Anchorage, Alaska would happen to stop at that precise location, Liard Hot Springs, at that particular time of day, to become the victim of a bear attack? Questions arise along the lines of, what if she had come to the park an hour earlier and left an hour earlier? What if they'd arrived there the day before? Then would she have avoided what happened? In a meaningless universe, what happened to her was random and without rhyme or reason. Now, viewed from a perspective of destiny, a deterministic universe, other elements come into play. There's the question of, do people realize when their time is near? Patty had remarked several times to friends and family, I will never live to see 40. Well, she was 37 when the bear attack occurred. She had remarked just before leaving Paris, I want to get away from it all and start a new life. And there's a very strange, which her daughter, Kristen, who's now an adult, wrote about in a topics forum thread. Apparently, and this was just joking, of course, when they were leaving Paris, at the very beginning of their trip, they stopped at a guy's house, and Patty jokingly said, you know, when I get back up there to Alaska, I'm going to feed the bears. And the guy looked there and he said, girl, those bears will eat you up. And he was just joking, just making an offhanded remark. But it takes on a cryptic, predictive type element when you view what happened. You know, in light of what happened, a lot of different things take on a different meaning, you know, depending on one's point of view.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we ask ourselves that all the time, you know, in day-to-day living. You know, it's like, oh, darn, you know, maybe this wouldn't have happened if I had done that, or, you know, that person would still be alive if, you know, I had done something different. And, you know, it is.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to think about.
Absolutely it is. And there seems to be some indication that some people have some sort of an awareness subconsciously if their death is imminent. It could be that some people have a subconscious awareness when their time is near. Those are deep questions that mankind has wrestled with for ages. I guess since the dawn of mankind, these are questions that... And as one of our occasional guests here on the show, psychologist and the founder of the Birth Order Group, Henry Baxley, he says he believes these questions are unanswerable. He thinks that certain questions are simply unanswerable. And I think that's a very interesting comment coming from him. And I think it's definitely something to think about. Something for all of us to sit down and think about, can this be answered, or is it going to be an unsolved riddle or enigma? Some people seek answers in philosophy, some seek answers in logic, some, of course, seek answers in religion. Terry, what's your opinion on that sort of thing? Do you think it's an unanswerable thing that we'll just never know the answer to?
Yes, in my opinion, I believe that it is. It's like we can never know what's going to happen. It's like, you know, I can walk outside tomorrow. I'm 62 years old, and I've come close to death a couple of times. But, you know, something always happened that prevented that. And so, you know, in my opinion, it's just, you know, living day to day, we don't know what's happened. What will happen? I can go walk out the door tomorrow and be hit by a bus, you know, or, you know, I can live to be 82 years old. It's all, to me, it's all part of life. It's all part of life.
Well, and getting back to viewpoints and belief systems and philosophical positions, many would say that all of the narrow escapes that you've had when you came close to death but didn't, that it wasn't your time, or it wasn't meant to be, that there's a reason you didn't die at that time. That's part of some of the belief systems that some people have.
Yes. Do you have any idea, you know, anything that they can do to prevent bear attacks?
Well, first of all, I think there need to be rangers more stationed at these parks more often, obviously, and they need to be equipped with more than just bear spray. You know, if that means firearm of some kind, then absolutely. I think the general tourist public, and of course there's signs that warn you about the bears. As you go into Liard Hot Springs, there's a big sign there warning you that there could be bears there. I think that general populace is not necessarily afraid enough of bears, and that maybe does not realize the danger they could be placing themselves in. I think to be vigilant, to be aware, I think that there's things one can learn to avoid putting oneself in the proximity of a bear attack, I think definitely, probably there's safety in groups. There's safety probably not wandering off by yourself in a wilderness area like that. I would say that's probably good. It's probably good to carry some kind of mace or bear spray, that type of thing. But it definitely would be a good idea to have a gun or a weapon, as you talked about. If you're going to be in a wilderness area like that, you need something to protect yourself, because it can come out of the blue. It can happen suddenly. You may not see it coming, and if you have a firearm, you have a distinct advantage in terms of being able to protect yourself or defend yourself versus maybe just picking up a stick or using some type of bear spray. You're much better off if you do have a firearm of some kind.
Yes, because without any kind of a weapon, no one stands a chance against a bear, and especially a starving bear.
That's correct. You had asked earlier about... Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I've never been to state parks and things like that, or Yellowstone, which I would love to see, but if I did go to those areas, I think that, I would at least know enough of everything that I've heard through the years to be prepared for that. But as you said, I think, an awful lot of the people are not. They're not, even in day-to-day living, a lot of people are not aware of the danger that they face every day, even just walking out the front door and getting in their car and getting on the road.
Absolutely. I know one of the things when you're visiting a remote provincial park like that, a wilderness area, they talk about don't leave a lot of food in the car because the bears can smell that, and they can tear an automobile open just like a sardine can, like we would open a sardine can. Those big claws and the amount of strength that bears have, they can just break right in. And break right into a car, break right into a log cabin. They're very difficult to defend against in that type of scenario, because structures, they're so strong they can just rip right through a structure, whether it's metal or wood or whatever it is.
And another thing I thought of too was, one of the main reasons that it happened is because the bear was starving, and they had shut off its supply at the, what would you call it, the dump? Supply of food. And it's like, you'd think that in times when they know, and they have to know, the rangers have to know when the animals are starving. You think during those times there's places that they can set up, I won't say a food tray, but a food area for them, where they can come and eat every day, to where the animals aren't starving. Yeah,
and make it sufficiently distant from where people frequent that there would not be proximity between the humans and the bears.
Uh-huh. And I know they have the capability that if there are numerous starving bears in the area, they can move those bears to another area. I know they have the capability of doing that.
Yes, they do.